Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Therapized. My name is Dr. Lalitaa, and I'm really excited about this episode because we get to just straight away deep dive. It's a conversation with someone called Tasha Bailey, who is the author of a book called Real Talk. And if you can see the video, this is what the book looks like. And as you can see, I've made loads of notes, which we'll be going over today. Tasha is amazing. She knows how to just take people straight into their shadow self, their inner child, and understand certain patterns that are coming up. So join us in this conversation to really deep dive and understand why we show up the way that we do, talking about trauma, talking about the inner child. Join us now. Hi, Tasha. Thanks for coming to Therapize. I appreciate you making the time and the space to be here.
No problem. Thank you for asking me for being here. Like, this is really lovely.
I can't wait for our conversation because I know it's going to go deep dive and we're going to go straight into really quality and meaningful conversation about real life and often topics that we don't really get to discuss every day. So first of all, I have your book in front of me, Real Talk. And I think it's such a beautiful book. It's got everything in there. If you're looking to start therapy, if you're wanting to understand the process of therapy, it's all in this book. So my first question, Tasha, is what made you want to write this book, Real Talk?
Oh gosh, so much. I think so. The idea of real talk is that a lot of the time, mental health, wellness. Probably only just now we're starting to talk about it more openly.
Yeah.
But I grew up in a time where most of us didn't talk about our mental health or didn't talk about what mental health actually meant or what therapy is. And we ended up hiding a lot of ourselves. It's a typical thing of when people say, "How are you?" And a lot of us don't actually say how we really are. We usually say, "I'm fine, I'm okay," but that's not the real
Yeah.
answer. So real talk is about having real conversations with yourself so that you can have real conversations in the rest of your life and have a better journey with self-love and with healing. So I've always wanted to have a book. I cannot see every client in the world. I cannot meet everybody in therapy. And actually, a lot of people might not actually want to ever try therapy or they might be too scared to. So I wanted to create a tool that would be kind of a bit of a midpoint, a starting point for people where they can understand how to start working on themselves, what is therapy, what does it mean to heal and to find self-love. And then that's how We'll Talk was born.
And I love your introduction in your book because you spoke about how you were also in therapy because therapists need therapy. And you spoke about your journey of like, oh, I cannot wait to get out and to be healed. And when you were talking to your therapist in the introduction, you spoke about how you were saying this to your therapist and your therapist turned around and said, well, actually, no, that's not the case. Like life is a healing journey. And I wonder what your what your thoughts were, or just sharing a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I guess like in that moment I was really like feeling emotionally exhausted. So when you're a
Yeah.
therapist, you usually have to be in therapy throughout your training. So I was 5 years deep in therapy and feeling like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to be fully healed so I'd never have to deal with all this stuff ever again and just live my best life. And yeah, so my therapist said, actually, no, that's not how it works. We are healing for the whole of our entire lives. There's no end point. You will be more healed tomorrow than you are today. And I think that, yeah, I think it's that thing of realizing that there is no perfect version of you. There is no
Mm.
graduation for your therapy or for your healing journey. And I think it's actually also really exciting. It means that I'm always going to be growing and healing and getting to know myself better and better. It's almost
Yeah.
like in a romantic relationship, we don't just want to fall in love with someone and be like, we know everything about this person and that's it. We actually want to be growing with this person and getting to know this person throughout the rest of our lives. And that's how it should be with self-love as well.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because often, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, is when people come into therapy, they are trying to understand themselves. They're trying to understand themselves. They're trying to make sense of who they are, why they present the way that they do, and really just going back to like their inner child or their early experiences that have given them certain beliefs that are creating this story of why they keep showing up the way that they do. And I wonder, like, from your own journey, what do you think your biggest takeaway was about a story that you had been continuing with, or a belief that you had moving forward through life?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I did a post about this before Christmas and it literally went viral and is still rolling, I think, with like 10 million views. And it's about so for me, I'm the youngest of five. And my older siblings are much older than me.
Mm.
And I had this narrative that I carried of I have to be the good one. I have to be the one that doesn't make any mistakes that the other ones did. I have to
Yeah.
be the trophy child. I have to be the perfect one, you know. And so I carried this kind of perfectionism thing of I have to be, you know, good at school and good at work and good in my career and good in all these things. And then I guess what that means is that then when things aren't so good, or when I
Mm.
fail, or when, you know, actually embracing other parts of myself, like the messier parts, I wasn't really allowing myself to go there. So that's kind of, I had to go back to inner child work and unpicking that need to be the good child or the good student and actually allow
Yeah.
myself to be messy, allow myself to like do things that might make me fail. Like I think the year before last, I started doing roller skating classes because I was always terrified of it because I knew that I would fall. And that is not
Yeah.
a good child perfect thing to do. So I went back to learning that at the age of 32, just so I can learn what is it like to fall and to make a mess and to like not be perfect at something and just enjoy it and find the joy in it.
That is so beautiful, Tasha. It really is. It's like really just embracing parts of you, like you said, that you've sort of like shamed away, or it's like, I can't share these parts of me because they're not good enough, or people are going to look at them and judge them. And there's so many people, don't they, who live life like that, where they limit themselves, they stop themselves from doing things because of what they're worried other people, how they feel other people are going to judge them. And I wonder, like, what would you say to someone who's struggling with a belief of not feeling enough, or feeling that they need to follow certain rules to fit in or not to be judged by others?
Firstly, have compassion for that side of you that needs to do that. That's come from somewhere very deep, maybe somewhere that's a place of part of you that's had some pain or is
Mm.
fearful of rejection. So have compassion for that. Don't be angry at it or mad at it. And then just think about, almost brainstorm or map out all the parts of you that get
Mm.
held back because of that need to be perfect.
Yeah.
You know, I always wanted to try roller skating, but I was fearful of it. You know, so there's going to be so many different parts that you're cutting back from yourself, you're snipping away, which actually would bring you so much joy and so much life and so much vitality. So maybe think about what those things could be.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And it's really interesting when you were talking about your story and your journey. I'm also one of five, but I'm the second oldest. And the second oldest, I also took on a very similar role of being the good child, the good girl, and following this. I need to follow the rules, better not do anything bad. I need to follow what I need to be doing. And you follow that pathway, and you follow that the choices that no one's told you to do, but you feel you need to be doing them. Because if you stray away off this pathway, you feel so bad, you feel guilty. And I think that sitting in that guilt is such a horrible feeling that we end up just going down the route of doing what we think we should be doing because it pleases everyone. It keeps everyone quiet, and it means then that we're almost like in the shadows and no one really sees us. But yet we want to be seen. And I wonder if that's what you see with your clients when you work with people who also might be presenting with similar symptoms.
Absolutely, and it kind of follows them into many different parts of their life. So, like I think I was saying this in the post that I'm talking about, is that it will make you have really poor boundaries at work because
Mm,
you know
yeah.
you don't want to have a task unfinished because you feel like it's going to make you feel bad, look bad, or that it's going to make you feel guilty. Or even when you're dating, you're putting on the very best version of yourself, but it's not the authentic version of yourself. And then we end up in these relationships that are really unfulfilling because we can't actually be ourselves. Or when we
Yeah.
are ourselves, the person that we're with is like, who are you? You know, this is not who the person that you showed me at the start. So yeah, it can put so many people in sticky positions. And I see that a lot in therapy. And
Yeah.
a lot of the time in therapy, then it's about creating space for them to be the messier parts and creating space
Mm.
for them to, you know, practice what does it feel like to not be perfectionist and to let go a little bit and also to celebrate them when they do that as well.
And isn't it beautiful to see people grow and people to step out of that fear where they are even in the therapy session, when I know even with my clients, when they first come in, and you can see how fearful they are of sharing certain things or saying certain things. But when you offer that safe space, and you're not there to judge or shout or criticize, but it's to try and understand what's going on. And as they progress, you just see them blossoming, and they come on and they start speaking out, and you're like, yes, this is it. And I wonder if you also see that.
Absolutely. And I find that it's really interesting because often as therapists, you see that before the client sees that.
Yeah, yeah,
So I've had so many clients where they've done something new or different, and then it hasn't gone how they wanted it to go, and then so they shame themselves for it. And I'm like, but you did
yeah,
it. Like, it didn't go how you wanted it, but you still stepped out and you did something different. That's incredible. And sometimes you have to, as a therapist, hold that
yeah.
joy and that affirmation for them until they're ready to receive it. Yeah, it's an interesting journey of like seeing this thing that you're so proud of for your client, but they can't see it for themselves yet.
And it's beautiful that we are able to reflect that back to them as well, and let them know that this is how we see it. This is what's going on from us. And because they feel safe, it allows them to take on board what you're saying. And even if they find it really difficult to compliment, that again opens up another wound there to try. And so therapy is just always ongoing, and there's so much that you can keep taking away, to just learn and grow from yourself. And I know you do a lot of inner child work. What does that mean? What does inner child work mean?
Inner child work is, so we all have an inner child. This inner child represents a lot of our childhood memories or
Mm.
experiences or narratives that we picked up about ourselves. Our first 7 years of life are some of the most impactful years that we will ever have
Yeah.
because that's when our brain is forming. We have our first attachments, like our parents, our family. We learn so much about our personality. So, a lot of our learning of what we know about the world and life comes from those first 7 years. And a lot of people in therapy, they get frustrated when they want to change something about themselves or something about the way that they see things, and they're frustrated because those first 7 years are what are the building bricks, and it's going to take a long time and a lot of practice to get out of those patterns that we learned from those 7 years. So inner child work is about connecting with that inner child in yourself, the young
Yeah.
part of you that maybe has unfinished business or pain from the past, connecting with them and embracing them as well. It's not just about healing pain, but also just embracing them into your life. So
Mm.
often when I talk to clients about self-care, we think about what things would your inner child like to do right now. So it's keeping that part of yourself connected and also allowing yourself to heal through that younger part of yourself as well.
And when you talk about inner child, is that a majority of the therapy work that you do? Do you often find inner child work comes into that?
Yeah, I think inner child work shows up in so many ways.
Yeah.
So even I was having this conversation on Threads, how a lot of us choose jobs that might have something to do with our inner child work. So a lot of therapists, even therapists, caring professions, doctors, nurses, if we kind of track back to like their childhood, there's usually something
Mm.
in their story which says that they had to be a caretaker or that they wanted to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
caretaken more as a kid. So often like our decisions as adults can kind of come from a seed in the past somewhere. Even when I have a client, if I have a client who's arguing with their partner, I often then go and ask them, okay, what was happening for your inner child in that moment? What was being provoked? What was being triggered? And what do you think might have been triggered for your partner as well?
Mm.
So yeah, it does come up in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, because we all have an inner child, and sometimes, like, say if I'm talking to you now and I say something, it might also bring something up for your inner child, and you say something back, and it's then bringing up something for my inner child. And when we have that awareness, it allows us to communicate in a very different way, where we may not be reactive, or if we notice we're triggered by something, it's taking that time out to journal, reflect. And I know that in your book, you've got some brilliant reflective tasks where people can sit down and do more of this work, by understanding their beliefs and going deeper into making sense of their patterns and why they may present in like a caretaker role, or why they may present as like people pleasing, or the one who's like showing up and like I've got it all together. So what's all that about? And when you unpack the layers, it sounds like there's a child underneath all of that, a child who's screaming out to say something, but often we just ignore that child because we've found these other ways of coping. Is that how it feels from your perspective?
Absolutely. So there's all those, like I said, all those layers that kind of come in,
Yeah.
and that's, yeah, from our inner child, our past. And yeah, it's about kind of understanding those layers and understanding where they come from, what you needed in those moments that you now are trying to look for as an adult. And the other thing of inner child work is, and a client actually taught me this, is it can be really helpful for compassion. So,
Mm.
for
Yeah.
example, I once had a client who had kind of very toxic, difficult relationship with their parent, but actually through trying to make sense of their parents' inner child, help them have a bit more compassion and understanding for the relationship.
Mm.
The kind of underlying things that were making it feel so toxic between her and her mum. Yeah, having that kind of thought about not just your inner child, but also somebody else's. And if you
Yeah.
know a bit of their story, it can be quite helpful to kind of make an understanding of what's happening in your relationship with them as well.
It's like that deeper compassion, isn't it? Of like, I'm not just seeing someone here react or shut down. There may be something going on, and if not with everyone, but with certain people, you can continue that conversation to try and understand. If it's your partner, if it's your siblings, or a really good friend, you might want to go further into trying to understand. I just think there's a really beautiful connection that can come from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you ever get clients though that come in and be like, "But my childhood was perfect. Like I didn't have anything wrong, or I didn't have anything that was going on. It's got nothing to do with my childhood." Do you often get that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's so many reasons why that happens.
Yeah.
One reason is it could be a defense. It could be like, I don't want to go there. My childhood was great. There's nothing to touch there. Let's just stay with the present. So it's kind of a self-protection. So there's that. Or there's like just a lack of awareness or
Mm.
not knowing what. I think a lot of time people think of trauma and they think very
Yeah. Yeah.
big, scary things. And sometimes trauma isn't just, what we assume it is. It could be small things. It could be, or small things that happen frequently. For example, like a parent who never shows up to parents' evening
Mm.
or never shows up to any of your, personal accomplishments and stuff like that. Like that can also be traumatic because you're feeling a sense of emotional neglect, which is trauma. So a lot of the time, I find it's people are not aware of what a difficult childhood
Yeah.
means, or maybe it's not even about having a difficult childhood, but it's having a childhood that lacked some things or lacked some ingredients. Obviously, children need safety and
Yeah.
shelter and food, but they also need consistent love and emotional safety. Having a parent that
Mm.
they can be open with and that they can talk about their feelings with. Actually, a lot of people didn't have that,
Yeah.
especially I think of the older generations. We emotional and not emotional love, but having conversations about mental health and emotions
Yeah.
wasn't very common 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of people, I think, they don't realize what that question really means.
And when you also speak about the defense, it's also people will try and protect their parents, or they'll say, no, 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 like my parents are brilliant. And yeah, they may be brilliant, but there may be also other things that your inner child perhaps didn't get that you're not even aware of. So often you feel that defense that can come out, and people can like, no, 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 I don't want to go there. But I think that's also about building up the trust and letting them know that you're not here to blame their parents. You're not here to point fingers, but it's for you to make sense and to give you a level of understanding about how your inner child has developed into where you are right now.
Yeah. And no person is perfect. So
Yeah.
even if you're like, my mum was amazing, she was always there for me, she's one person and she can't fulfill every single need that you had as a
Yeah.
child. So there's going to be something that maybe you wish she was more there for you for, or there's going to be something that even if you feel like she was always there for
Mm.
me, blah blah, it might mean that you might reserve things in yourself because I don't know, you might have guilt about bringing too much to burden her. And,
Yeah.
so there's so many different parts of it, and it's just about remembering that no person is perfect, and there's always going to be light and shade,
Yeah.
and it's important to brace both of those parts as well.
That's beautiful. And also, like, being a sensitive child, like when you're sensitive and you pick up on things. I remember growing up and you'd know that, oh, your parents might be stressed out with something, or something's going on here. You then didn't want to be a burden, or you didn't want to add more to that. So then you made the choice to, okay, I'll just be good, or I'll just carry on this and I'll just do this. Or you didn't want to get in trouble. So you would make your own rules up about how you felt that you needed to behave. So maybe it's got nothing to do with like, oh, mom and dad not being there. It's more of like, how did we perceive the situation through our sensitivity as well? So with therapy, there's layers and layers and layers just to work through, to really understand how you used to show up and how you still might be showing up, presenting in that same way.
And also, you can also even add the layer of culture in there as well,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I grew up in
definitely.
a British Jamaican family, so
Yeah,
that's going to have another layer of, yeah, we don't talk about feelings, we don't do that. That's just, we just crack on, you know,
yeah.
and
Put it under the carpet, shove it under the carpet, and it's not there. Even if you trip over it, it's not there. You don't talk about it. Just get back up and carry on.
and you definitely don't talk to other people about the family or about your feelings. Never do that. So you're going to carry those, like, even if it wasn't specifically said to you, you're going to see that within your family and you're going to carry
Yeah.
those lessons. And that in itself is something that needs to be unpacked and healed through.
Yeah. And in your book, you wrote something really interesting, which says, whatever we don't address becomes a mess. And I wonder what you meant by that when you wrote that.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to this thing of, if we have experienced trauma or lack, or there's something we didn't receive as a kid or even as an adult, we might go into relationships that are traumatic or difficult. Even though it's not our fault that those things happen,
Yeah.
we do have to take accountability for healing through those things. So, as, for example, if you're going through a breakup, you have to give yourself the space and the time to heal and to work through the pain that was left behind before you can move on to something else. Otherwise, it's just going to spill into your next relationship and your next one and
Yeah.
your next one. So it's about almost like, just like a physical wound, you need to attend to it, you need to take care of it, you need to give it whatever it needs, give it nourishment, give it nurture, find out where the pain is, allow it to heal, and then that is giving it that time to process.
Yeah, yeah. And I think even when you're speaking there about like understanding just the things that may have happened as a child and how that continues to show up, you spoke earlier about actually it can leak out into your relationships, but it can also leak out into like work side of things. It can leak out with friends. So if you're the caretaker, for example, and you've learned to look after everyone else and make sure that everyone else is all okay, you will keep going, and in all of your relationships you'll be the one who's not really seen but the one who's there for everyone else, and you might struggle to be vulnerable or to share your emotions. But that then might also play out in the working environment where you're constantly just like doing everything for everyone, and then you're compromising your time in the evenings. Like I've seen that with certain people where in the evenings they're working till late because they've said yes to things, or people have just learned to give it to them, because people learn, don't they, how to treat you based on how you are or what you're allowing and what you're tolerating from others. And I wonder if you also see that it plays out not just in work, in relationships with friends, but also like romantic partners as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's where, like, that's the point where people come to therapy, is when it's all
Yeah.
become a mess, rather than, before, when actually the trauma or the pain has begun. It's more like when all the things are then kind of created into this kind of messy thing, and then you're having to then unpack, okay, where is this coming from? Where did this start? Oh, it's here, and probably here, and probably here. But yeah, absolutely, it links into our friendships, our relationships, our work, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our body, how we look after our bodies even. Yeah, it kind of rolls into this kind of, yeah, this mess. And then you have to start unpicking, how do I solve this? How do I work through this? And where is it coming from?
And that's like the next bit, isn't it? It's like when people come into therapy space, they don't leave the same person. And I know that that sometimes frightens people because they say, I don't want my life to change, but I do want these different things. I want to feel inner peace. I want to feel happy. I want to feel content. And it's like, okay, right. And when you start working through things with them, they realize actually they may not be in the job that they thought they wanted to be. Their friends may not be able to meet their needs. They question their partner. And I'm sure there's studies as well. I remember reading some studies that people that enter therapy and or they're in a relationship, they often, I don't know what the percentage is, I need to double check that, but there's a percentage of people that will leave that relationship because they learn, actually, that's not for me and that's not what's going on for me. And it doesn't feel right for me. So it's really powerful. Therapy is a really powerful space in learning so much about you that you might even be questioning when you leave or during the process, is this even the relationship I want to be in? So it's big stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it's this is really. I'm not sure if this metaphor is going to make sense, but when you were saying that, I was just thinking about how therapy is almost like holding a mirror up.
Yeah.
Normally, when you're walking through life, you're just looking forward, but when you have the mirror up, you can see all the stuff behind you that you're often not addressing, and I think that's where that comes in with like the relationships that yeah, a lot of people do end up having to decide to themselves actually this relationship not is not right for me, but having
Yeah.
therapy as a mirror there actually allowed them to see the truth of what was going on in the relationship and what they actually deserve and what they should actually have in a relationship, and that their current one isn't meeting those needs. So yeah, it can be really revealing and enlightening, but also yeah, confronting and challenging as well.
Yeah, lots of different emotions that can come up. Because I remember when I did my thesis and I was looking at my research, the research that I focused more on was how our interpersonal relationships change when we go into therapy. Because there was a lot of research already into romantic relationships, but not into our family or our friends. So when I started researching this, I really found the key thing was self-awareness. So when we become more self-aware, it changes the dynamics and the people that we are around. And it's not that we change people. Sometimes it's just changing that dynamic a bit where we may have said yes, yes, yes all the time, and then we might say, actually, I'm not able to make it at this point, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. And not everyone will be okay with that. But if you're able to have them conversations, great. But not everyone will be okay, and sometimes that's where we have to choose to like close the door or leave it unlocked because it might open again. But I think there's a real grief and a real loss with that as well. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah. Not when you've kind of lived a life of not having boundaries, when you suddenly have
Yeah.
boundaries, not everybody's gonna like it because they can no longer benefit from it. But that doesn't mean that you should then compromise and allow them to have what they had before. But yeah, that does mean that you then have to grieve, potentially
Yeah.
grieve a relationship that once was, but knowing that that relationship wasn't taking care of you as a person, actually you was taking care of it, but it wasn't, you wasn't receiving anything back. So yeah, it's there's some hard decisions that you have to make once you're when you're in therapy and when you're working
Yeah.
towards self-love and healing and looking after yourself.
Yeah, I see a bit like you're going through life like with the blinkers, like with the horse. They have the blinkers, so you're walking through life like that, and then you come to therapy, and the blinkers come off, and you start to see everything all over again, and you're just like, this is everything that's been happening. I can't believe this, and then you may get feelings of like resentfulness or anger, frustration, and happiness, joy, because you're connecting with different parts of you. So that it's just a whirlwind of different emotions, but you're learning to sit in them. You're learning to regulate them, and as you wrote right at the beginning of your book, this is an ongoing journey because different things keep coming up that will keep bringing things up for you. And it's to sit with these big emotions that once upon a time you locked away. How does that, like, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I was just thinking about there's a bit of a probably what I'm naming as well in that first example in my book. And I think a lot of us have is that this hope when we think of self-love and healing that it's going to be this like lovely, fluffy journey of like bubble baths and face masks and living our best lives. But actually it comes from a lot of difficult decisions
Yeah,
and
yeah,
having to make very difficult changes and having to confront things that aren't very comfortable. So there's
mm,
kind of this two sides of self-love, or even with inner child stuff, I say that there's kind of two parts. There's inner child work, and then there's inner child play. And
mm,
yes, we can do all the things that our inner child used to love to do and connect with them that way, but we also have to do the hard work of healing through the stuff that we had to shut down when we were a kid or had to shut down
yeah.
when we were a teenager. And that's really going to be lots of anger and tearfulness and frustration and lots of other difficult feelings too.
When you say there's a difference between play and work, is that the main difference? Like play is like really stepping into the inner child and allowing yourself to be, and that's the release, the fun, the joy. But the other side is the work, and that's where what's the work side?
So the work side is, I guess, looking at the unfinished business and looking
Yep.
at the
Yep.
heals that haven't been the heals, the wounds that haven't been healed before. Yeah, it's kind of like they both go hand in hand and they're both necessary. So, for example, someone who's a perfectionist
Mm,
really needs to embrace the inner child play because that will allow them to let go and allow them to, yeah, find joy outside of structure and control and into like
mm,
just other things. But then they also need to do the work of understanding where does the perfectionism come from, and who needed me to be a perfectionist when I was younger, and why did I need to be a perfectionist when I was younger? What would I lose if I wasn't? And that can be very confronting and difficult.
And what's the common theme that you normally notice comes up for people like that aren't able to let go of this perfect? Like, where does it come from?
I think it often comes from having quite a strong inner critic, maybe, or experiences where we were strongly criticized or shamed or embarrassed, made to feel like a burden. And then we carry that feeling, we carry that narrative with us and do anything that we can to avoid it.
Yeah.
And often that is through trying to be controlling over things or trying to be perfect at things, trying to be good. Yeah, that's often what I see.
Because even when we talk about perfectionism, people pleasing, and we talk about like that, there's this control over it that I need to be or I need to look a certain way. I don't want people to not see me in this way. It's that fear of judgment of people are going to see that I'm not in control, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy. And we don't know what people are thinking, but yet that's the story that we tell ourselves. So we may be very hyper vigilant and we're looking. So me and you are talking now, and I might see that you've made a certain expression, and I'm like, oh, stop talking now because you're boring, Tasha. Like, just carry it. But I've made that choice, and I've based that on what I'm seeing rather than me being able to communicate that. Hey, I just noticed this. Is everything okay, or is this conversation something that you're interested in? So it gives a chance for me to understand if that's what I'm actually what's really going on for you, rather than me assuming and running off with a thought. But that judgment, that fear of judgment, it's huge, isn't it? In how much power we give to what we think people might be thinking about us, and the impact that has on our everyday choices, our behaviors, and the way that or the doors that we choose to knock on because of that background noise of what if, or what they're going to say, what they're going to say. And I wonder how like you work with clients with that.
I think it's interesting because one of the things is that with that, we're focusing on our viewpoint is on the other person rather than ourselves.
Yeah.
So when I'm working with clients, I kind of bring it back to them. So what parts of yourself are you leaving out by focusing on this, like this other person? What or like what do you think about that, or what do you
Yeah.
want to happen with that? What would you like, what do you think? If, for example, if a client is always looking for compliments from their partner, I'll say, well, what did you think of yourself in that outfit? What did you
Yeah.
think of that lip color? What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? And bringing it back to them, and also just like noticing when kind of critical language comes up as well, like things like shoulds and
Yeah.
I should have
Yeah.
done this and I wish I'd done that and it's not good enough, and noticing those things and almost helping them reframe and think about where does that should come from, and actually let's rebalance it. What did you like? What did you enjoy? What are you proud of? So that we can kind of bring in, I call it what do I call it in the book? The inner fairy godmother.
Oh, that's
So
beautiful.
yeah, so bringing like the more nurturing, loving
Yeah.
part, and that might even include, in the book, I've got a exercise where I say to the readers to think about a character or a person who, for you, feels like a very warm and nurturing godparent, like a fairy
Yeah.
godmother. And that might be, for me, I think of Angela Bassett because I just feel like she'd be an amazing godmother. Um, and I just think, okay, what would Angela Bassett say to me, if I'm feeling low? What would she say in this situation? How would
Yeah.
she give me words of encouragement? Or it might be someone that it might be a natural grandparent that you had, or a neighbor, or whoever, someone that gives you that warmth and gives you a different perspective that you can
See, someone that
internalize.
comes into my mind is Yoda. I'm like, Yoda,
Oh,
I've got Yoda.
cute. And then you can internalize Yoda
Yeah.
and be
Yeah.
like, okay, now that's part of my voice, not just my inner critic, but also I've got this inner Yoda voice that is also giving me that encouragement and giving me a more balanced view of how I am, or how I'm perceived.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost like what you said at the beginning, which is holding a mirror up. You're holding this mirror up to individuals and you're saying, hey, look, what did you think of this? Rather than looking outwards, it's like, no, but what did you think of this? And what did you, and it's that real deeper work that we do in the therapy space, which is holding that mirror up and letting people know what we see, but also for them to see it, for them to have the space to look at themselves and really understand what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's reminding me of like I so my original training is working with children and young people, but I now actually only work with adults because I just love. I think that we all have an inner child anyway.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
remember once working with a girl who had very negative view about her body, and there was one
Mm.
time when she asked me to draw a picture of her. So
Okay.
she drew a picture of herself and I drew a picture of her, and then we compared the pictures. And just really interesting for her because she got to see that how she viewed her body was very negative and
Mm.
very negative and very critical. And then how
Yeah.
I viewed her body was very different, and it gave her a different perspective. And she was like, "Oh, is that really how you see me?" I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I'm not the best drawer, but this is this is kind of a representation." And it just gave her a different viewpoint to go and digest and to think about and to question her own viewpoint as well.
Yeah. And this is why therapy is so beautiful. It's not that we're biased because we're both therapists. It's more so the changes and the subtle changes it can bring up for people and just the tools that it gives people moving forward in their lives.
Mhm.
Yeah. You've got something else in your book in chapter 6, and your chapter 6 is all about what holds us back. And you started off with a quote, which is, "The more we've been hurt, the stronger our armor." And I wonder what you meant by that.
Yeah. So, I guess when we've been through pain or through trauma, the first thing that we tend to do is find a way to protect ourselves. It's our kind of
Yeah.
human instinct because it's like the whole thing of like, I've been hurt and I never want that to happen ever again. And often the way that we protect ourselves is by creating a shield. And that might be, for example, if we've had a come out of a relationship, we might say like, I'm never going to another relationship, or
Mm.
I'm never going to a relationship with this kind of person again, or
Yeah.
I'm just going to be single. We say these things and we protect ourselves in that way. But the problem is, it also blocks us from finding a different result somewhere else. So if you say, I'm
Mm.
never going to have a relationship again, you could find the love of your life, but you've cut yourself away from that experience. So
Yeah.
you're never going to experience that. So yeah, these shields are there to protect us. They come from our ego. Our
Mm.
ego doesn't want to be hurt. It doesn't want to be vulnerable. So it will do whatever it can to keep us, yeah, protected and safe.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
really safe. It's just more maybe hiding our vulnerability.
Yeah. And when people have that safety, so that safety of like, say if they've been hurt, they've been in a relationship, they've been hurt, they're heartbroken, and they're like, right, that's it, I'm never gonna date again, or I'm never gonna be in a relationship again. How does someone overcome that safety mechanism now? Because they've experienced pain. It's like touching the radiator and burning your hand, and you're like, I'm never gonna ever going to touch a hot radiator again.
Mhm.
But how would you tell someone or work with someone who it has that very strong belief and that very strong sort of like I'm not going to do this again? How would you work with someone like that?
I think it's about reframing and thinking about what is safe. So even when you said that about the
Mm.
hot radiator, I'm not gonna touch a hot radiator again. You could then reassess it and be like, okay, I can touch a hot radiator, but maybe not, directly. Maybe I'll put my hand near it, or maybe
Yeah.
I'll touch it for a
Yeah.
second, or maybe I'll do it when the heating's low. So you're thinking about what are the conditions that need to be in place for it to be safe for me. So, for
Mm.
example, if it's like, I never want to have a relationship again, it might be, okay, instead of that, what do I need in place to think about having another relationship? When
Yeah.
would I feel safe enough to have a relationship? Or who would I want to date? Or what would be important for me in a relationship if I do get into one that I've learned from
Mm.
my last one? So it's about kind of reassessing and almost using, whatever happened before, using that as data to kind of
Mm.
figure out what do I need next.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like research and experience, isn't it? It's like, right, okay, if you've had three, four of these relationships where the same thing keeps happening, what is it that's going on there for you? What's happening? And it's like really trying to use that as research, but then have it as like your experience of like, okay, that's my experience, but moving forward, it becomes your wisdom. So when you're entering relationships, so actually, last time when I touched the hot radiator, I just went straight for it. But this time, I know it's going to burn me.
Mhm.
So let me slowly just work my way towards it to make sense of like how far can I get to it before I get burnt again. Yeah, it's like a learning experience, isn't it? It's like how we learn and we grow. And I suppose that goes back to your first quote is whatever we don't learn from, it will become a mess. It will show up in our lives in so many different ways.
Yeah.
And sometimes people have to be ready, don't they, to come into therapy. They have to be ready
Yeah.
to be like, I'm fed up of this now. I need some support.
Absolutely. And, sometimes people think that they're ready and they're actually not. And that's
Yeah.
okay as well. You might go in
Yeah.
for a couple of sessions, be like, actually, I'm not ready to address all this stuff. Let me come back at another point. And that's okay. And it's about, like, I guess, allowing yourself to pace yourself and to think about, what do I have in place that's going to hold me? Because therapy
Yeah.
is, yes, it's great, and yes, it's reflective, and you're going to learn so much about yourself, but it can also be really unraveling. And in my work, when I've worked with children, I've had to explain to parents that it's probably going to get worse before it gets better,
Yeah.
because as
Yeah.
soon as I start to allow kids the space to think about their authentic feelings, it's going to spill out into other places in their life, and then the parents are going to be like, oh my gosh, Billy's crying all the time, or Billy's having a tantrum. Yes, because he's addressing his real
Yeah.
authentic feelings. So now my
Mm.
work is to help you hold that as well. So yeah, it's going to feel a bit worse, as in more vulnerable, more messy, there'll be more tears, more anger, more envy. All those uncomfortable feelings are going to come to the surface because you've been pushing them down for so long, but
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
need to in order to get to the next place.
Yeah, yeah. And even when you were talking just there, I think people often, it's not just like with parents. I also see it with, like, say if someone's coming into therapy and they're in a relationship with someone or they've got their family at home, and they might feel like, okay, I'm coming into therapy and I'm going, but how do I now communicate to them that this is what's important to me and this is more of my need? Like, how do I share that with them?
Mm-hmm.
So they also understand, rather than me trying to slam the door because I'm annoyed that they're making me do something, or if I'm just getting angry and knocking something, instead of being able to speak about it. It's like there's different ways of doing it. So I think it's not, it's like a ripple effect. It doesn't just stop in the therapy space. It's a ripple effect of all the different parts in your life.
Absolutely.
And chapter 9 is boundaries. And in chapter 9, your quote that you start off with is, we can't nourish someone else if we're malnourished ourselves. What does that mean?
It means that, I guess it's the thing of, like, you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't give people your energy and your love and your nourishment if you haven't started with yourself first.
Yeah.
You should always, I always say, start the morning with yourself and then give for the rest of the day if you need to or want to. But yeah, you can't deplete yourself trying to help others, because it's going to exhaust you emotionally and physically. And
Yeah.
I think as humans, sometimes we think we're invincible, or that especially if you're a people pleaser, or if you're used to being, I don't know, the eldest daughter and giving to everybody, you can think that you're invincible and that everybody needs you, but also
Yeah.
you and your body need you too.
Mm.
And it means that, if we're trying to pour from an empty cup, or nourish people when we're not nourish ourselves, our body is not going to thank us for it. Our body is going to be
Yeah.
absolutely stressed and tired, and illnesses will show up, and immune systems will be low, and
Yeah.
it's about looking after ourselves continuously.
Yeah, and I often hear that. I'll hear of like, I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out, I'm just tired of it. I just want it to go away. I just want to stop thinking and ruminating about all these different things. And it's only then you start to understand, hang on, how are you actually self-caring yourself? Because you're so busy doing this and doing this and doing this, and it's almost like being on that hamster wheel of like, go, go, go. And
Mm.
they get to that point where it's like, I can't continue like this anymore because it's impacting on me.
Hmm.
And it's only then they come off this sort of hamster wheel and start looking at, what did this serve me going on this hamster wheel, go, go, go. And also me coming off now, how can I implement self-care? And initially it can feel really bad. Like you can feel very bad, like, oh, I'm just doing nothing. Like, I'm
Yeah.
just going to sit here and watch the TV, or I'm just going to do this. Like, it can feel, or it can bring up emotions of guilt because someone else has asked you to do something and you've said no for the first time. And that can bring up a big feeling. Do you often see that with clients?
Yeah, because it could often be like, how dare I think about myself?
Yeah.
And actually, if you don't think about yourself, how can you expect anybody else to do that as well? You can't expect someone else to set your boundaries for you. You're the keeper of your own boundaries. And of course, there's going to be guilt if you've never had to exercise boundaries, or if you grew up with very rigid boundaries in your family, or very leaky boundaries in your family. You're going to feel a guilt when you then implement your own boundaries because it doesn't feel comfortable when you didn't feel comfortable when you received those boundaries or didn't receive those boundaries, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it's very normal to feel guilt. Guilt often comes when we need to make a change, and this is the change that you need to make for yourself.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely love it. And I was watching something the other day, and someone spoke about how when you're on a flight and you're about to go up, the air hostess will start talking, and he's like, "That's the most important part of the flight because you are getting free life advice." But everyone is busy doing something. Someone will be on their phone, someone will be chatting away, and he's like, what the air hostesses say is, when the oxygen mask comes down, make sure you put it on yourself first. Even if it's your kids, even if it's like your people that you love, like make sure it's on yourself first. Then you start assisting everyone else. And I suppose in a way that's what boundaries is all about, is being able to look after yourself first so you can be there for others. But if you're giving out, giving out, giving out constantly, constantly, constant, like what's left in your cup to give to yourself? There's nothing there. And that's when then you're left feeling tired, exhausted, frustrated, resentful, because you're like, what about me? But no one's going to put you forward unless you don't put yourself forward, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are so many different types of boundaries as well. You know, there is like
Yeah.
financially, you know, if you're giving out too much money or giving out stuff, or your personal space, or emotionally, or yeah, even like borrowing things. Like there's so many different boundaries, and
Yeah.
there might be some that you feel like, oh, I'm really good at that. But there's some that you might be neglecting as well. So yes, I think boundaries are such an important thing. We learn about boundaries when we're like 2 years old and we say no, no,
Mm.
no to our
Yeah.
parents constantly. But then somewhere down the line, we forget how to say no, or we too scared to say no, and
Mm.
we lose our no. And I think boundaries is about reclaiming that, and also thinking about that there are other ways to protect our self as well. When we don't set boundaries, we end up feeling very resentful of people, and
Yeah.
resentment takes up a
Yeah.
lot of energy. And yeah, do what you can to not go into that place of resentment.
Yeah. And resentment is often like people coming into your space, but you may be someone who is very mindful of others, but that doesn't necessarily mean other people are going to be the same. And often people, if you don't speak out and let the other person know how you're feeling, they may not know how you're feeling. So they're going to keep, if you're just keep giving things out, people are going to keep taking.
Yeah,
You're like, why are they taking it?
yeah,
Don't they know that I'm exhausted? Don't they know I'm tired? And it's like, no, they don't know because you're not telling them.
mm,
So there's another part of that, which is learn to speak out and communicate what's going on before the bottle gets too full and it's like bleh, everything comes out because you've had enough and you're fed up of everything.
yeah. It's like, you know, if you're in the supermarket and they're giving out free samples, of course you're gonna go like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. It's the same thing in your life. If you're given free samples of your love and of your energy, then people are gonna keep taking it until you're completely depleted. There's nothing left, even for
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah, yeah. And Tasha,
Hmm.
your book, how long has it been out now?
Since September 28th, so it's
Yeah.
been 3 months, maybe 2, 3 months.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book, and as I said, I know that it takes you through a journey of like what therapy is, but also a journey of your inner self and really understanding your inner child. And you also use shadows, your shadow self you refer to. What does the shadow self mean?
Yeah, so shadow self is, it's almost like this part of ourselves. It's almost like in your house, everybody has this one room or cupboard that you throw everything in that you don't want to deal with, you know,
Mm,
or the basement. So it's basically all the things that you don't want to deal with in yourself, or the things that you don't want to claim within yourself, and you throw it into the shadows so that you don't have to look at it because it's behind you. So, for example, if you're a perfectionist, like I said earlier, it's all the messy bits, it's all the things that you think you might fail at, the things that might not look good to other people. You put it
mm,
in there. The problem with that is it's going to pile up, and it's going to, in a way, control you
yeah,
or show up in ways that you can't control. So if you try to think of an example, yeah, I can't think of an example, but yeah, it's that's kind of what the shadow is. And oh,
yeah. I think you said it beautifully. It's like there's a part of you that you've just thrown it into the cupboard and you don't want to look at it. So if something keeps knocking up, like for example, if you're getting fed up maybe of people keep taking from you, is there something else that's going on in your shadow self? Is that what you mean by that?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like
Yeah.
Carl Jung says how um basically the only way to kind of live a fulfilling life is to embrace your shadow, essentially.
Yeah.
You can't lock it away, you can't cut it off, you have to embrace it. So for example, like I said before about roller skating, I don't like the idea of falling. I don't like anything that involves me publicly feeling embarrassed or publicly failing. But then I missed out on the joy
Yeah.
of roller skating. And then by connecting with that, I was allowing myself to then feel that joy and to feel that kind of freedom that comes with roller skating. But there are other things like, someone's sexuality. They might cut off parts of their sexuality because they're fearful of what society will think, or what their friends will think, or what their family will think. Then
Yeah.
it means that they then can't be their authentic selves, because they're then cutting off a very important part of their identity. Even as a black woman, like, a black woman in Britain, it means that maybe sometimes there's rooms that I go into where nobody else looks like me, and so I
Yeah.
might unconsciously cut off parts of the way that I speak, my East London accent. Like, there's certain things that I might do that I put it into the shadow, but then that's not me being my real true self.
Yeah.
So it's about, how do I make sure that I'm bringing my East London accent into those rooms, and how do I ensure that I just am myself, I wear my natural hair, like what are the things that make me me, that I make sure that I bring with me, that rather than put them into the shadow, because they don't belong to be there.
Yeah. So do you think it's self-awareness and fear? Those are the two tools that you need to be able to help you make sense of it. So fear being understanding like the fear, because fear is a thing that's keeping is keeping the shadow self away. And then you've got the awareness, which is you understanding, I noticed I've just done that now. What's going on there?
Yeah, and I think maybe it's risk taking as well, because you
Mm,
can be aware of it and you can know where the fear is coming from, but then you still have to make the step of bringing it out into the light and taking it out of the cupboard.
yeah.
So it's kind of that bravery of allowing yourself to take the risk of showing those parts of yourself, and maybe
Yeah.
doing it first with people that you feel really comfortable with, that you feel will really understand you and see you, and then bringing it to other places in your life as well.
Yeah, no, how beautiful is that? It's like when we show up at being our authentic self without that fear of I need to fit in, I need to just present myself because if I don't, I'm worried about what's going to happen. And it's like when you stop worrying about that side and just allow yourself to show up as you are, there's a real beauty with that, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's like you said, and you wrote this in your book as well, is like you continue just shining as you are, if you allow yourself to step into that authenticity.
Absolutely.
So Tasha, I've got for anyone that wants to see this, if it's on the video, here it is. It's Real Talk and it's by Tasha Bailey and the cover is beautiful. So go and check that out. But also, before we end any sort of podcast, there's always this one question, and I don't know if you know what the question is, but the question is, do you think that life is fair?
Oh,
I love people's responses to this.
do I think that life is fair? I don't think life is fair. Um, I think. Oh, this is such an interesting
It's a
question.
really interesting question, isn't it? It gets people to really think about it. Like,
Yeah.
oh, like I don't know because I do, but I don't. And like you can get sort of stuck in it.
I don't think life is fair in terms of, just thinking about, and I talk about this in one of the chapters in the book around
Yeah.
identity and social justice, of like, there are so many different intersections in the world, and
Yeah.
each person in each intersection will have a different experience of the world, and
Mm,
will be treated by the world differently. So there's
yeah.
that bit that which isn't fair, because there's some people that have a lot of privilege, and there's some that have absolutely not.
Yeah.
So there's that perspective, but there's also things like trauma and pain show up in different ways, in different places, in different times of our life, and in some areas of the world more than others. Like there's that sense as well, which also isn't fair.
Yeah.
But I think, what is fair about life?
Yeah. Yeah. See how it just brings up layers and layers and layers.
Yeah. Maybe I think what is fair. Okay, this is what it is. So life itself isn't fair, so external life isn't fair.
Yeah.
But what is fair is that we all have the capacity to
Mm,
heal through whatever we're dealt, or whatever we're given. Our
Yeah.
body and our brain is incredible for healing trauma.
Yeah.
And so what is fair is that we all have that vessel, that tool to heal if we can get the right support and environment around us.
That is beautiful. That is absolutely, because we're not told, or we're not given uh choices of where we're going to be born, and how, or with who and what environment. But what we do have, I suppose, are like different choices to move forward, and knowing that we have our physical body, we've got our brain, and being able to do things with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a juicy question.
We like to end with that. It just keeps your mind young, because we're just like, what? Hang on 1 minute, let me just get that. But I just want to say thank you again for making time, and coming into this, because I think it's really important that people get to hear more about you, understand more about what it is that you do, and understand the therapy space, but also the different strategies that we tend to use in therapy, and deep diving into more of the inner child as well. So I appreciate you sharing that.
No, no worries at all. Thank you for having me and for, yeah, letting me bring this kind of part of therapy.
And if people wanted to get in contact with you, how would they get in contact with you?
So you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Substack as Real Talk Therapist, where I share lots of free mental health tips and well-being stuff. And also you can find me through my book, Real Talk, Lessons from Therapy in Self-Love and Healing, or Healing in Self-Love.
Yeah. And I will make sure that there's a copy of that, like a link attached to the podcast episode as well. So thank you very much. And we will see you on the next episode.
Yay! I'll see you soon.
Bye bye.
Bye.